Are you like me and like to read about random history and interesting stories of the good old days? Well, check out a book called Selling Sex in the Silver Valley about the little town I grew up in called Wallace, Idaho, and its seedy, illegal, and yet once socially accepted past of prostitution, gambling, and booze. The book, written by my previous guest on episode 43, Dr. Heather Branstetter, can be found on her website, findheatherlee.com. Use promo code GIG43 at checkout for 30% off your copy with free shipping.
3, 2, 1, yeah!
Good morning, grinders. How's everybody doing? Been taking a little time away, enjoying the holidays and all that. Hope everyone got to see my what was it, the 2023 year-end wrap-up. There's a lot of good stuff in there from every episode from 2023, or at least every episode that I could find stuff for. A couple of them didn't have anything, either it was remotely uploaded and I didn't have a file or whatever, blah, 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 technical jargon. Anyway, most of that stuff was in there. It's pretty good. Today, I am here with Bert Caldwell. How you doing, Bert?
Good. Yeah, things are going okay right now.
Yeah? It's better than not going okay.
Right? Yeah. So, yeah.
Well, cheers, man.
Thank you.
Enjoy some of this DALL-E scotch that Eric Fody brought me.
Absolutely.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's a nice, smooth.
Yeah, a little bit of burn.
Yep.
Nothing on the back end, though.
Yep.
Just goes right down. You can drink it like water. It's dangerous.
Yep. Can be. Yeah, no, I enjoy good scotch. I don't drink a lot of it, and I don't have a favorite right now, but
yeah,
I just try to sample as many different ones as I can.
Yeah, Rachel got me a whiskey smoking kit. Now that I'm thinking about these things.
Nice.
Yeah, it's over there. I didn't even know that was a thing.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
I didn't get a chance to play with it though. So.
Yeah, I've never tried that. I don't know how that affects things.
Well, I mean, I think you're just supposed to be able to take pretty much any whiskey and add a smoky flavor to it with wood chips and like this little torch thing.
Right.
That sounds it looks pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'll have to play with that at some point.
Right. No, and I've been recently just starting to get back into cigars, and
yeah.
So I've been doing some of that, and again, sampling.
Right.
But yeah.
Yeah, I wish we could have done a cigar, but
right. No, that's fine. I had one before I came over.
Good. So we were already talking before we started. So what is this zinc smelting?
Well, back in the early 80s, over in the Kellogg area, they had a lead and zinc smelter up there.
Right.
And I worked in the zinc plant. I was what they called a stripper. And, of course, that always starts interesting conversations because I'll always just start with, yeah, back when I was a stripper. And people will look at me and it's like, you were a stripper? And, and then I can continue on it with, I'd start work at 11 o'clock at night. I could be home in bed by 4:30 in the morning. I generally, in 81, 82 was making, $800, $900 a week take home.
That seems like a lot back then.
It was a lot back then.
Yeah.
I, at that point, weighed about 175 pounds. And, and all of that was all factual. It just was a little misleading.
Yeah.
Because it had nothing to do with taking your clothes off. No, they had rows of cells. If you kind of envision how a lead acid battery works,
yeah,
this worked the opposite way. So we had rows of cells that were about 400 feet long. Each cell...
Is it like in the ground?
Well, it was up in a building, and it was all off the ground.
Oh, okay.
And each cell was about 4.5 feet wide, 8 feet deep. And then, it must have been about 10 feet front to back. And I don't remember how many plates were in each cell, but my job was to remove the plates out of a cell and strip the zinc that had accumulated off of those. And so what they would do is they'd crush the zinc ore into a powder, dissolve it in a sulfuric acid strontium carbonate mix, and flow it through troughs overhead, and then it would flow down into these cells, and they would charge those cells between 9 and 11,000 volts, between 11 and 14,000 amps.
That's a lot of power.
That's a lot of power. And that would cause the zinc to electroplate out of solution onto aluminum cathodes. And my job was to take those cathodes out and go rinse them off and then strip the zinc off. And
so this is the process of collecting the zinc.
Correct.
Getting it to separate from the other ores.
From the rest of the ore.
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
And so I would do 56 plates was what they considered a load or an hour's worth of work. And I generally at that point would do 12 to 16 loads a night. They had an incentive program where every extra load you took above 8, you could leave 45 minutes earlier.
Wow.
So it was all about working fast and working hard.
But did they pay you by the plate?
They paid you by the load.
Oh, okay.
And they considered a load an hour's worth of work. And so it was an hour's worth of pay.
So if you got 10 loads done in 6 hours, you got 10 hours worth of pay.
Correct.
And you got to leave.
Got to leave an hour and a half early.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah. And my normal day was 12 loads. So I got paid, and it wasn't, I want to say the hourly rate then was just over $11 an hour. But then when I was over 8 loads, so loads 9 through 12 was time and a half.
Yeah.
So that was closer to $16 an hour. And then over 12 was double time. And so...
And this was what, early 80s, right?
This was 81. 82.
Yeah.
I think the zinc plant closed in 82. I don't remember when they took the big stacks down up there. Do you remember?
Yeah, this was late 90s.
Was that how late it was? I wasn't around then.
It was mid to late 90s, I think.
Okay.
That's a good question. See, that's something we could look up. When did they take down the smelter stacks? So, Smelterville smoke stacks. I want to say it was like 96, 97.
Somewhere in there. Yep. That first article looks like that's...
Yeah, that could be it. Stacks topple. So what's the date on this? Oh yeah, look at that. May 27, 1996.
Okay. Yep.
Thousands of watches. Bunker Hill landmarks are destroyed. Symbolic smelting.
Yeah, and I actually missed that event. I had moved out of the valley by then.
Oh, really?
And I was gone for... I don't think I even returned to the valley one time for about 20 years. And that whole valley just completely changed in the time I was gone.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so when did you leave?
Probably 82. Right,
so right after they stopped?
Right after they closed the zinc plant. It might have been 83.
So we moved there around like 91, 92. Would have been just after the raid.
Oh, right.
The FBI raid.
Yep.
But some FBI were still in town for like a year or two afterwards.
Sure. Yep.
So like everything had gone down just at the time where we came in.
Right. So you guys probably got a pretty good deal on a house then.
I don't know. I imagine my mom wasn't paying too much as far as rent goes, but
I know.
Yeah. It was. I think it was just at the start of the EPA really coming in and trying to clean stuff up.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Yeah, I know. Shortly after that place closed down, the real estate market down there just collapsed because everybody was leaving.
Yeah.
And I mean, most of the people just thought the whole place was going to become a ghost town.
I'm surprised that it didn't.
I am too, honestly.
I mean, thinking about it now, because I mean, to me, it kind of is.
It's
so much has changed even since I lived there. And I mean, I was talking about this with one of my last guests, Heather, too. It just, it seems like all of that stuff, especially, I don't know if it's, just the age group of people,
Right.
You know, and it's like a wave, because it seems like now there's younger people coming in from all different
sure.
places and
Yeah.
walks of life that are kind of reviving it in a little bit of a way,
Right,
kind of
right.
like, or I mean, at least Wallace,
Yeah.
you know, but
Yeah, and one of the things that I appreciate about Wallace is they've really embraced tourism.
yeah.
For whatever reason, Kellogg almost refuses to.
Yeah, I've noticed that too. Well, and it seemed like Wallace was kind of pushing out of tourism for a while, but now they're kind of starting to realize that's a mistake.
Yeah,
because it's their bread and butter.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. When I grew up there, even Sweets was still open.
Right.
We called it Greasy's, but
Sure.
You know what I'm talking about. Yeah. That was still open. We used to play in the arcade every day. All
Right,
that stuff.
yep.
Everything there was booming.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. When I was a kid, we had a roller skating rink in Smelterville.
Yeah, I think I
Roller
remember
skate,
that.
arcade, pizza place, bowling alley, all in that one
Yeah.
structure.
Yeah.
Now it's a
Well, even the Kellogg bowling alley. Closed.
it's pretty much gone. I think somebody just lives there now.
Well, if I remember last, somebody bought it and they were trying to turn it into some kind of like a bakery.
Yeah, and I think
but more like a factory that
Right.
makes a lot of stuff
right.
commercial.
And I think they're trying to do like commercial organic stuff. I
Yes.
think.
Yeah. But last thing I heard about that was they bought the building and then found out afterwards how decrepit it is,
Right.
and messed up, and how much
Yep.
work it needs.
Right. And I think that happens with a lot of it. Even the junior high building up there. I was one of the first classes. I don't think I was the first class, but I was in the first few classes that attended that building.
Right.
And it's all but condemned now.
Yeah.
So, and
It hasn't been maintained much.
No. And I graduated high school in 1980. So,
Yeah, so they moved. So when me and my ex lived over there, they moved all the kids from that middle school to the other school behind it.
sure. Yeah.
And then I think they had started mixed classes at the high school.
Right.
Something like that.
Yep.
So I think they moved all the junior high kids to what was the elementary, or they moved something. I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't even know where the actual school building is now. I think it's back there on what they call the old airport. Which is kind of the area that butts up to the gondola base there.
Yep.
But
It's crazy to think though, $11 an hour in 81. I mean, that was probably a decent wage.
that was a pretty good wage, and that was like my first real job.
Yeah.
That was my first real job out of high school.
So you're talking about like 18, 19?
Yeah. And I had no bills.
Oh, yeah.
And, we were just out there just running around and playing and smoking a lot of pot. And,
Yeah. Right.
That's where an awful lot of our money went then.
Yeah.
But because I was making good money, I always had it. So I think I was the guy that everybody came to hang out with because I always had something to smoke or something to drink.
Yeah. Yeah. Been there.
Yeah. And that part of my life is mostly gone, which is fine. I don't even go to my high school reunions because
Yeah.
I don't know. It seems like the vast majority of the people that I went to school with, they're still those same people. They haven't progressed. And, maybe I have a bad attitude in that respect, and maybe I'm misinformed or misimpressed, but that's how I see it.
Yeah. Or maybe not.
Maybe not.
I think in this day and age, there's a lot more of people who are not growing up.
Right.
Yeah. They're 50 years old and they still think they're 20.
Yeah.
No, dude, you're 50. That's fine. You don't have to stop being active and become some old fogey, but
Yep. And I'm 62 and I still think I'm surprised when I see myself sometimes. I think, man, who is that old fat guy now? And I still, we're building a house now, and I plan the building projects and the steps in the house like I would when I was an actual carpenter at 30. So things then that used to take me a couple of hours now take me several days. And I'm just slower.
Yeah.
And I don't have the stamina that I used to have, but that's the way life goes.
Yeah, but you got knowledge, man.
Sure. Yep. And
It's worth its weight in gold.
it can be. Yeah. So, and I've hired a couple guys that work with me up there that, that have said, I don't know how to build a house, but I'd like to learn. I was like, well, I can teach you how.
That's good.
So some of those worked out, some of them didn't.
Yeah. That's good, though. Kind of like a paid internship.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not bad.
Yeah. And, but yeah, when I was working up at Bunker Hill there, back to that, it was a miserable place to work. You'd walk in and the acid mist was heavy enough in the air that when you took a breath, you'd go, huh, and you couldn't breathe. The first time you went in there, your body actually would not inhale that air. It said, this is bad air. Don't breathe it. You had to consciously overcome that reflex. I smoked cigarettes at the time, and for 2 to 3 weeks, I couldn't smoke a cigarette because it burned too bad.
Yeah.
Then you went to Cools for a while, the menthol cigarettes, because that felt better. So yeah, it was terrible. There really wasn't much in the way of breathing protection. You couldn't wear it if you wanted to. Every now and then, if the mist was too bad, you'd grab just like the N95 filters, put one of those on, and before I was done with that, I'd usually tear off the bottom of it just to shield my breathing a little bit, but I couldn't breathe well enough in there because I was working too hard.
Right.
And so
yeah, I don't think they had the maybe they did, but the full face respirators with the charcoal filters and all.
Well,
that
they had them, and there
but they were probably more expensive and harder to come by.
Real expensive, I think.
Yeah.
And I did a couple of various jobs up there at that whole facility where cleaning out a couple of furnaces where you'd go in there, but you'd have an actual air pack respirator, or not an air pack per se, but it would have a powered filter on it.
Oh, yeah.
Hanging on your belt.
Yeah, I've used those before several times.
But that was in a extremely dusty with toxic dust. So you wouldn't be breathing that in. But yeah, in the cell room, we just couldn't really wear anything. We all looked like idiots because we were all wearing anything but jeans. You'd go in there with jeans on, and that acid mist would literally deteriorate the cotton fibers in 2 shifts. Imagine dipping your jeans in acid. That's what it would do.
Yeah.
And so
see, I can't even imagine what that's doing to your skin.
Right. Yep. And so everybody would go to the thrift stores and buy polyester slacks. So yeah, there was guys up there. I don't know if you're familiar with what a leisure suit is or was.
Yeah.
We were wearing those in there.
Yeah, Saturday Night Fever.
Yep. Because they're polyester, it's plastic, it wouldn't be deteriorated so bad. And at the end of your shift, you'd go into what they call the dry, which is a big laundry facility and showers and locker space, and you'd take your clothes off and throw it in the laundry. They would do your laundry for you and hang it back on your locker or your basket. You'd go in and shower and everything there. And that way you weren't...
Which I guess is good, so you wouldn't be tracking that stuff home.
Yeah, and they still do that at all the mines up there.
Yeah.
So that you're not contaminating your vehicle and, taking it home. So, but yeah. And then, of course, that acid that was flowing overhead would occasionally be dripping on you. There was baking soda sitting all over the place. You never were probably more than about 5 steps from a box of baking soda. So to neutralize
it. Yeah.
Yeah. There were days when you'd come out of that zinc plant and you'd be covered in baking soda. The acid had run down your back, and you'd just dump a box of baking soda down the back of your collar. Man. Yeah. And
this sounds like the most awful job on the planet.
It really was. It was terrible. And it was hazardous. They had those banks of cells set up so that one was positive ground, the next one over was negative ground, the next one after that was positive ground. I fortunately had called in sick one night, dumped a shift, and one of the guys that I normally would work right beside, he was pulling a cell or a plate out of the cell, and the header bar broke off of the plate, and he lost his balance, fell over backwards. And as he did, he reached out behind him and he caught himself on the next bank of cells. And so his feet were on a positive ground and his hands hit a negative ground. And it literally cooked his body.
Oh yeah, as much power as you said is running through those things.
Yeah, I'm sure he didn't feel a thing.
Yeah, it's probably instant.
I imagine.
Yeah.
There was, literally there was a black mark on the floor where his body laid there and cooked. And I can't imagine how anybody that happened to witness that, how they responded or felt after that. I considered myself really fortunate that I called in that night and didn't witness that.
Yeah.
But yeah, then there were nights when you'd go in there and they'd have the strontium carbonate mix off and it would create foam on these cells. And in the foam was, I believe, hydrogen gas, which of course is very flammable, explosive.
Yep.
Well, this foam would develop and it'd build up about 1.5 feet deep on top of the cells. So you'd have 1.5 feet of foam, 400 feet long, and you're dealing with this high power, you're making sparks. So what we'd do is we'd grab a handful of the zinc gravel that was laying all over, run as fast as you could, throw it as far down a row of cells as you ran by, hope it made sparks, blow up that foam, and then you'd go pull your load of plates out of that cell.
Jesus.
And there'd be yellow powder drifting down off of the iron structure, which was just iron sulfate powder. On those nights, which was very seldom, because there was no money being made that night for the company, because when that strontium carbonate mix was off, you weren't getting good zinc out of the cells.
Yeah.
But the place sounded like a war zone. I mean, it was just boom, boom, boom. And, you'd have these explosions going off all night long.
Seems like there's a better way to do that.
You would sure think there should be. And I don't know. I think they still use a similar procedure up at in Trail, British Columbia. I don't know where else they do this, but I think most all of the ore out of the area now is trucked up to British Columbia to the zinc plant up there. And I don't know if that's accurate or not, but
zinc is used in a lot of stuff.
It is. It's used in a lot of stuff.
It's one of the most important metals that we have.
It probably is. It's used to cast so many things, and part of it is it's not a terribly expensive metal. But yeah, I worked on what they called experimentals, which I had an air hoist. I would throw a clamp down, lock it over with my foot, hook the air hoist chain onto it, lift it up with, I think, 7 plates at a time would come out. And then I'd put 7 plates in and then go to the next 7.
So you had like a spreader bar with a bunch of links on it. You just hook those to all the plates that you can hook to.
Yep. And and the guy that actually died up there that night, he was doing what they call hand beats. He would take 1 plate at a time out. And that was miserable work. That was so much work.
Yeah.
And me being...
It all sounds like a shit ton of work.
It really was.
Dangerous work.
Yeah, and me being a young guy, I got really lucky getting onto the experimentals. But the one thing, like I say, you had to commit to 12 loads a night or 12 hours worth of work.
Yeah.
That was my normal. But, as you went through and you worked, you got a shift differential for working graveyards. If you worked on a Sunday, you got a extra differential. If you worked on a holiday, you got paid for the holiday, and you also got your holiday pay if you didn't work. So whether you worked or not, you got paid for it.
So you basically got paid twice.
I got paid 3.5 times if I worked on Christmas on Sunday.
That's awesome.
So yeah, there was if I managed to pick up anything over 12 loads that night, that 13th, 14th load, I want to say I was making about $45 an hour for.
That's pretty good money, man.
That was really good money then.
Yeah.
But, you know, I consider myself somewhat fortunate that they closed that plant when they did, so that I didn't have to make it a career. I still have most of my teeth in my head.
Yeah. So I mean, it's kind of a blessing.
Yeah.
That it closed.
Yeah. Most of the guys that worked up there, you know, for most of their career, their teeth were gone.
Yeah.
That acid would get into your system.
Yeah. And just eat them out.
Yeah, it'd cause your teeth to go bad.
It's like drinking too much soda. It just rot your teeth right out of your head.
Yep.
'Cause that acid just eats them.
Yep. But yeah, so it was really kind of a miserable place to work. And I only did that for a couple of years. It was interesting.
So when that closed and you left, where did you go to after that?
I think from there I went. I went to be a groundskeeper at the old Mission State Park.
Oh, okay. In Cataldo?
Yep.
Nice.
And I did that for, I want to say, a couple of years. And that was kind of a fun job. I learned a lot about Idaho history and about that particular facility, place and the mission building itself. And I was able, of course, to go in and see some of the things that not everybody could see. I could go up into the attic and whatnot on that old Union, or that old church building.
Yeah. Yeah, we went there a couple of times in school when I was a little kid. And I was always fascinated with that place. I've been fascinated with Native American studies and American Indians and stuff ever since I was little. I have no idea why. So
right, yep.
If anything that has to do with that, I'm all about it.
Right.
Yeah, I've been reading about Lewis and Clark and stuff a lot recently. We took a trip over to Oregon to the coast, and while we were staying in Astoria, we went and saw the fort that's right near there.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. We did that. My wife and I took a trip down the coast. We spent 6 weeks just driving around the coast. We slept in the back of our SUV.
Yeah.
And camped the whole time. I mean, we got a hotel room every now and then, but we'd find laundromats along the way and did a lot of camp cooking and a lot of restaurants. And
it sounds like an awesome trip.
I thought it was a fantastic trip. My wife, I don't know if she was really as excited about it. She's not a big camper.
Not a real outdoorsy gal.
No. She grew up with, I think she said she was 18 before they had running water in their home.
Oh, wow. So
she grew up on a ranch, and so she's over it.
Yeah, she's just more over it.
Yeah.
She's done.
Yeah.
I could see that.
Yeah, so her and her sister both, my brother-in-law, he's an avid hunter and goes out all the time, and her and her sister are both, I just don't get it. I don't understand why people think it's fun to go out and camp. But we do.
It's still good to get out and be with nature and just,
Yep.
not be around technology and computers and all that.
Yep. But no, working out at the mission, that was an interesting job. One of the biggest things that I did, of course, was just mowing the lawn out there with a big hydrostatic steering mower.
Oh yeah, one of the big boys.
And did a lot of that. And actually, I think I probably knocked a couple of rocks out of the foundation on that mission with the tail end of that mower. But
I've been wanting to go see that again. I think they've added a bunch of stuff to it.
I think they have,
like new exhibits and things like that.
Yeah, and I haven't been there for decades now. But yeah, it was interesting. And
so you were just like a groundskeeper?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So yeah, a lot of lawn mowing, a little bit of like painting and things of that nature. Running weed eaters and grass whips to clean up the grass. And
is that all? So I mean, that would be a government job, though, wouldn't it, for state?
I think it probably was.
Yeah.
I think it was a state job.
Yeah, because I'm pretty sure that's all funded by the state and probably part of the county.
Yeah. And, at the time, that wasn't really a consideration for me. I kind of stumbled into that job. I've done that my whole life. I haven't really gotten any jobs by going out looking for jobs per se.
You just fall into them?
I fall into them.
Nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. You know, I don't think I've ever gotten a job by submitting a resume. I've gotten to the point where I just have given up on the whole concept of a resume. It just doesn't make sense to me that I needed to have a resume, because I just apparently never did.
Yeah.
But,
well, I mean, it depends if you end up somewhere, you know, by chance with people that you know.
Right.
You know?
Yep. And I know a lot of people, you know, they pick a career path, and they'll move from job to job in that career path, and absolutely that resume is going to be invaluable.
Yeah.
But I just kind of moved around and did things, and I'd work a job for a while until I wasn't interested in it anymore, and then I'd go to another job. And you know, and I've done all kinds of things. Like I say, the groundskeeper, the zinc stripper. I've done volunteer firefighting, changed sprinklers out there for a grass seed company, running the swather and the combines, and out there on the Rathdrum prairie, out by Post Falls state line, all of that area.
Oh, really? Working on the farms out there?
Yeah. And of course, most of that area, and quite probably where we're at right now, was just grass fields.
Oh, yeah.
Then.
Yeah, even I remember back in the 90s, after we moved up here.
Right.
We used to, because everything, which is funny, right? Because there wasn't much back then either, but we looked at Coeur d'Alene as the big city.
Oh, yeah.
You know, growing up over in the Silver Valley.
Right.
You were like, oh, you wanted to go to Best Buy or something.
Yep.
Well, yeah, it was here, but this was still all grass fields and prairie and farms and all that.
Yep.
It wasn't nearly then what it is now.
Oh, no.
You'd come driving over here, and you'd still pass, you know, a few miles of farmland before you'd get to the Best Buy.
Right.
That was just in the middle of freaking nowhere.
Yeah. Yep. And and I lived in Post Falls for a while.
Eagle Hardware and Garden was still here.
Right.
That'll tell you how far back that was. Before it was Lowe's.
Yep. And when I lived in Post Falls, I was working for a company called Instrumentation Laboratories. I had decided to be an electronics technician, and my dad, one day I was sharing an apartment with my girlfriend and my sister. And my dad came in and asked my sister, after many years of telling her she was going to college, and she'd go sign up, he'd pay for all her everything, and then she'd drop, because she just was not a college girl. She didn't want to do it. Didn't appeal to her.
So it wasn't in her wheelhouse.
Right. And so one day,
Thanks, Dad.
Yeah. And I happened to be there, and he decided he would ask her this time, "You want to go to college this year?" And she said, "No." I said, "I'll go." He's like, "All right, I'll pay for you to go this year."
Yeah.
And so that was when I started going to school for electronics. And that was kind of an interesting thing, because I actually went down to the college to look into it the day classes started. And I went and talked to a counselor, and he said, "The class is full, but there's one gentleman in that class that I know will not be there tomorrow. Every semester he signs up, goes one day, and never see him again."
That's crazy.
"You take these entrance exams home with you, do all the tests, and bring them back tomorrow and show up for class." And it was just kind of coincidence, because I was miserable at math at that point. I had never taken any algebra classes in high school, so I had no idea how to do algebra. I took these tests home with me, had my sister do the algebra test. That was the only way I got into college. Once I got in there and I started learning it, it's like, hey, this is kind of cool and it's fun.
Yeah.
And I was good with math, but I was not interested in it.
Right. Yeah, I can remember numbers really well.
Yep.
But working with them is a totally different thing.
Now, when I actually learned algebra, it became kind of fun and fascinating to me. But yeah, so I did the electronics classes, And then when I got out of school, I went to work for a company called Isotropic Computer that was over in the industrial park out there on Highway 10 between Coeur d'Alene and Post Falls. And we built, at the time, the IBM AT was the state-of-the-art computer. So this would have been about 1986, 87, somewhere in there, I think.
Yeah, it sounds familiar.
And I mean, that was, and that was an expensive computer at the time. I want to say the IBM was probably going for about $6,000.
Jeez.
The one we built, which was, you know, an AT clone, we had an AT and an XT, we called them, which were the same category of a machine as the IBM, which was the industry standard.
Yeah.
So we built those. I did that for a little while, and it was just a small company. Was the gentleman that developed the board and the motherboard for the machine. And then he had a salesman and a service tech and myself. And that was the company. He made a lot of money, I think, on taxes by giving machines to colleges. Every year he'd give 3 machines to Spokane Falls, to Spokane Community, to NIC. And, you know, when he did that, those machines could be written off on taxes at retail.
Yeah.
Which was substantially more money than you sold them for.
Right. Yeah. That's a neat little trick.
Yeah. And I can remember building one of those computers for, I think it was the city of Colfax. And they had that thing loaded up with, I want to say, 2 hard drives that probably were 1.2 gigabyte.
Jeez. That probably took up half a room.
No, it was a desktop unit, and of course this is clear back when you still used a 5 1/4 inch floppy drive. And we thought, what are they ever going to do with all this space?
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, your iPhone, of course, is hugely bigger than that now.
Yeah. I mean, any phone now you're walking around with upwards of 64, 128 gigs.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, I'm kind of amused at when I think back on that, because I can remember having that conversation with George then. What are they ever going to do with all this space? He's like, I don't know how they'll ever fill it up. And, you know, anymore.
Any idea what they used it for?
It ran their city.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, it was one of their city computers. And I don't know how many we built for them overall, but I can remember that first one that went to them. And then I went from there. I went over to instrumentation laboratories and I started out in assembly there, just building a body fluids analysis machine.
Body fluids analysis.
Yeah. So you'd go in, when you go into the doctor and get a blood test or urinalysis, this machine would do those.
Okay.
The lab operators just had to load in samples in little 10 milliliter cups and load them into the machine with the proper reagent chemicals. And then the machine would load the reagents and the samples in little discs that would then shine light at various wavelengths through to tell you how much of a certain chemical was in your body fluid, whether it was your blood or your urine.
That's how they do it.
That's how they did it then. Yeah. That was I want to say a $32,000 machine is what the loaded cost of the machine was then.
Yeah. And that, now they make that into something the size of my coffee cup.
I would think so. Yeah.
You know?
At the time, that machine was probably around 400 pounds. It was on casters. It was about 4 feet wide, counter height.
Jesus.
You know, it rolled around on the floor.
So a little bigger than a dishwasher.
Yeah, probably bigger than 2 dishwashers.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, anytime I go to donate blood, like they have to check your iron level and all that stuff.
Yeah.
So they just prick your finger, he sticks it on a little tab, slides it into this little thing that's probably no bigger than a small coffee can.
Right. Yep. And yeah, and I don't know what the process is there.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I did that for a while, and it was a kind of a fun job. The job was probably not as beneficial to me on a personal level as the people I worked with. Made a lot of friends there that, of course, I've lost touch with since.
Oh yeah.
But we did a lot of fun things. We had barbecues and raft trips. We'd go down on the Salmon River once a year and did that. I can remember one of the years we got one of the vice presidents of the company that lived in, I want to say Boston, knew a guy that worked on one of the fisheries docks over there. And so we got a shipment of lobster in that was caught on Wednesday, and we cooked it on Saturday.
So it's still pretty fresh.
Yeah. Would have been great if I'd have been a lobster eater.
Oh man,
never been a fan of fish.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh man,
But,
lobster's so good.
But yeah, we had that.
Put a little lemon juice on it,
Right,
smother it in
yep,
butter,
yep.
some parsley.
Yep, I'm just as good with a piece of bread in that butter. But yeah, we had that going on down on the Salmon River. Yeah, we did a lot of that kind of stuff, and a lot of barbecues, and and had to do all kinds of training. But I worked for them probably about 6 years, 5 or 6 years, I think. Then that facility closed, and when they closed, I had the opportunity. I could have moved to Boston. There was just no interest in going to Boston for me.
Yeah.
So I just opted not to, and they actually set it up to where they said, we're going to lay everybody off. We're going to close this facility in a year, and anybody that stays here until we lay them off, we'll pay you for a year after we lay you off. And I thought, yeah, sure. But they did. They were good to their word. They actually worked with the state and set it up to where as soon as you got laid off, you could go draw unemployment, and you still got paid for a year.
Wow.
So yeah, when I got laid off, my income at that point went up, I don't know, $800 a month. So it was nice. But yeah, working for them.
So you stayed on till they laid you off?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I actually transferred out from being a technician to the shipping department. So I was technically one of the last 3 people in the facility, I think.
That's crazy. I've never heard of a company doing that.
Yeah. No, I'd never. And I just couldn't imagine they'd do that.
Yeah.
But they did. So that was nice. But yeah, being a technician there was kind of a fun job. Assembly was interesting. I missed out on a big payoff when I was doing assembly. Me and one of the guys I worked with, we revamped the whole assembly process and took it from 47 man hours for a sub-assembly down to about 16. And to adjust the process, it all had to go through the FDA process. So everything that was done in there was documented and was step by step based on the technical writing manuals. And if they did any changes on the way the machine was put together or what was in the machine, even if they decided to change from a Phillips head screw or a slot head screw to a Phillips head screw, it had to be approved by the FDA to do that.
Jeez.
So it was a huge process and a big expense. But before they decided to close the facility, they instituted a program that said, we're going to pay anybody that comes up with a money-saving idea. We'll pay that person 10% of the annual savings.
Nice.
Unfortunately, Mark and I came up with this process, the new process of putting the machine together in about a quarter of the time. And it was just by changing the order of steps.
Yeah.
But we did that and got that all approved and in operation about 2 months before they instated that program. So I think we missed out on a few $1,000s at that point.
Well, yeah.
Tens of thousands.
Yeah. 10% of however much the savings would have been. That's a pretty big chunk of change.
Yeah.
Yeah, my Uncle Jeff, he worked for Hewlett Packard for many years. And the guy was in the computer industry, I mean, since they first started coming around, like mainstream and commercial. You know, I remember I went over to see him a few months before he passed away. He had esophageal cancer. And I went over just to hang out with him, spend the day with him. And so it was cool because he went back in time, you know, and he's talking to me all about all the stuff that I used to do, because I'm a big nerd too. But you know, he used to do computers back in the day when everything was on paper tape.
Right.
So, you know, if there was a problem with the program, you had to go back through this entire reel of paper and figure out where the hole was punched where it shouldn't have been punched or something like that. And then you had to punch a new hole and cover that with tape or something. Yep. And but he worked at Hewlett Packard for many, many, many years. And as it's been explained to me, and from what he was saying that day that I went to visit him, they have a very, very extensive, like, automatic assembly line with machines and robots and stuff that move everything around and all that stuff. And he played a huge role in getting that very first part of that entire automatic assembly line, like, set up.
Nice.
And I believe he used to write the software for the machines that built their DeskJet printers.
Okay.
So, like, back in the 90s, like mid to late 90s, when they inkjets first started coming out.
Right.
Yeah. So he was the guy that programmed the machines that built them, and he helped streamline their automatic processes and stuff.
Nice.
He did a lot of, and he constantly was trying to get promotions and stuff like that, and you know, trying to get moved up in there. And they screwed him over so many times because he didn't have a college degree.
Right. Yep.
He didn't have a college degree saying that, he has a, bachelor's in electronics or whatever the hell it is.
Yep.
And so they wouldn't give it to him.
Right.
And it's like, okay, well, this guy has saved you millions upon millions of dollars with the stuff that he's helped implement.
Absolutely.
And you're going to tell him no just because he doesn't have a piece of paper that says he can do the stuff that he's already proved he can do.
Absolutely. Yep. Yeah, I've seen that kind of thing going on. I was passed over for promotions, particularly at IL. I didn't get raises sometimes. And of course, it was through my own fault because I wasn't the guy. When you got your work done, when you got your machine assembled and aligned, you didn't have anything to do until the next machine was assembled, and then you had to align it and go through testing with it. And so I was one of the guys that when my machine was done, I'd just kind of hang out and BS with the other guy that his machine was done.
Yeah.
And every now and then a plant manager would come around the corner, and there might be 4 or 5 of us standing around just BSing. And the plant manager would come around, and all these other guys would go grab a broom real quick and start sweeping the floor or something. And I wouldn't.
Yeah.
You know, I was that guy that I wouldn't do that because we had very concise written job descriptions, and sweeping the floor was not in my job description.
Yeah.
So I didn't do it. And one day, one of the plant managers came to me or this particular plant manager came to me and said, he says, I know you do your job well. He says, but when I come around the corner and you're just standing there, he says, it doesn't look good. I said, well, I get that, but that's my job description. Mm-hmm. You know, he says, everybody else will go grab a broom. I said, but that's not in my job description, and you don't pay me to sweep the floor. And he accepted that. Yeah. But, you know, he's like, well, it'd be nice if you'd at least make an effort to look busy when I come around the corner. It's like, well, I'll see what I can do.
Well, I get that.
Yeah, I do too.
Having been a supervisor myself, you know, I totally understand that because I've had that same argument with people before. It's like, no, you hired a brake operator. That's what I do. So if I don't have parts here, what do you want me to do? It's like, well, be part of the team and go find something else to do.
Sure.
It's like, but I'm a brake operator. I'm not a welder. I'm not an assembler.
Uh-huh.
So if I don't have anything to do, I want to go home, or I'm going to stand here with my thumb in my ass.
Yeah, until somebody else hands me something to bend.
Yeah. And I get that. I understand that. And it's not that it doesn't make sense to me, but at the same time, especially when you have a company that does, incentives and stuff like that, which, my company didn't start doing that until just recently. But when you look at what you can do to be a part of a team and help the job get done, so then everybody benefits.
Yep, to help out the other guys.
Right,
yep.
Because then if you get this job done, a few hours earlier because you came over and lended an extra hand, well, now maybe everybody gets to go home an hour earlier.
Absolutely.
So when you look at it in that aspect, it's like, yeah, okay, I can't make you go over and help, but if you want more and you want to make more, you should know more and you should be able to do more.
Right.
And so demonstrating that by saying like, hey, what else can I do? Can I go to the assembly shop and learn how to do, turn wrenches and hydraulics and stuff?
Right.
Even if you never do it again, you still have that knowledge.
Sure.
And any good company will pay you for that knowledge.
Yep.
At least they damn well should.
Right.
So.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know when I was a supervisor, I absolutely hated hearing the words, not my job.
Right.
And I'd be like,
Yep.
you're right. It's not your job.
I can absolutely understand that.
And if anybody that I had like that, if we ran out of work to do, they were the first ones that I'd go to and be like, get out of here, go home.
Yep.
Be like, well, it's only been 8 hours. I'm not going to get my full paycheck. Well, too damn bad then, huh?
Right. Yeah.
You don't want to do anything else, so get out of here, go home.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And, and that was, at the time I was, let me say, in my early 20s, and that was the guy I was then. And
yeah, I get it. People grow and people change.
Oh,
but.
Absolutely. And and I can remember one day, I don't know, there was a policy that came down, and I don't even remember what it was, but I thought it was ridiculous. And it came from in a memo from the HR office.
Those are always good.
Yeah. And so I went in and talked to the HR girl, and I told her, I says, this is an asinine policy. This is going to cost money. This is going to slow down production. It's going to put everybody in a bad attitude. Said it's not going to help anything. And, and I just told her, and I wasn't belligerent about it or anything.
Right.
But apparently she took it that way. About a half hour later, that plant manager called a meeting, plant-wide meeting in the break room. And he said, I know you guys don't like this policy. Policy is from me. He said, I'm the one that came up with this, and I don't appreciate you guys sending in somebody to talk to HR about it. And she didn't like being called a stupid bitch, which I never did say that, but I can see how it came off that way.
Yeah.
And I just kind of let that slide until after the meeting was over. And then after the meeting, I followed him to his office, and I said, okay, obviously, I'm the one that went and talked to Amy. He said, yeah. I said, well, nobody sent me in there. I did that on my own. I said, that doesn't change the fact that I think this is an asinine policy. And, after that, and after I stood my ground and I explained my attitude or my opinion on it, he did actually rescind that policy. And after that, we were good. And we had a pretty good working relationship after that. A little while later, he called me into his office one day. And I don't know if it was because he didn't like how I dressed or what, but he called me into his office one day, and I'm thinking, oh, now what? And I went in there, and he says, I got this polo shirt. And it was, it was a Polo brand.
Yeah.
Or no, it was an Alligator. He says, it won't fit me. Will it fit you? And I said, I don't know. I tried it on. I said, yeah, it fits. He's like, well, you can have it then. So I don't know. It was just all of a sudden our whole relationship was different with that manager. I was his friend then.
Well, I mean, I could see, maybe he just realized that you weren't going to roll over and just take a shit.
I think that's what it was.
I've had that experience myself.
Right.
Sometimes you butt heads with somebody, but then they're smart enough to realize, okay, well, this guy, he's genuine.
Right.
Like
And
he's
the
not
budding-
he's not going to just roll over to whatever I say. Like he's at least going to ask questions, or if it doesn't make sense, he's going to be like, no, fuck you, I'm not doing that.
Right. And the butting heads didn't become personal.
Yeah.
And so.
And it doesn't have to.
Right.
It's like, no, it's a stupid policy. I'm sorry, but it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't help our team. It doesn't help the company. It doesn't do any good other than to satisfy some power trip that you have.
Right. Yep.
That you want to control something.
Right.
It's like, well, I'm sorry. It's not doing any good. If you want to do some good and help yourself, maybe try this instead. Just my 2 cents.
Absolutely. And that's pretty much how that interaction between us went.
Yeah.
And and then after that we were good.
Yeah. And I can't say I haven't done that myself. I've come up with some stupid ideas for stuff that's like, hey, no, this is how we're going to do this. And then, it is stupid. And somebody points it out to me later, like, yeah, this doesn't make sense.
Right.
But I was smart enough to, instead of just getting pissy about it, put your ego aside and be like, yeah, you're right. That is kind of dumb, huh? Okay, let's try it your way. We'll see how it works out. Sure. If it does, cool.
Yep. So yeah. Oh, and I guess I never did talk much. I did mention that I was over in the seed company.
Oh yeah.
We kind of just glossed over that pretty quick. I had a couple of interesting moments with that. That was fun.
Was that like Jacqueline seed?
It was Jacqueline.
Yeah.
And
that's always been like mysterious to me.
Right.
'Cause they had that whole farm over here.
Oh, it was huge. They I don't remember how many thousands of acres we did, but it was the majority of this prairie out here was Jacqueline seed growing grass.
And then they had their big place over by the dog track.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
it seems like they've all but just kind of disappeared.
I think so. And I don't know what happened, but yeah, I worked for the farm shop then. And the farm shop was overseeing sprinklers. Like I say, I did a lot of the changing sprinklers for them, and I did have one advantage with changing sprinklers is I was tall, and because I was tall, I figured out that I could do 2 heads at one time. So I could grab 2 pieces of pipe and lift them high enough and walk them across the field to the next set and do 2 at a time, which did it almost half as fast, or almost twice as fast, I should say. But so that was kind of nice. And I don't remember, I think I got paid 4 cents a head.
4 cents a head?
Yeah. You change every time you moved one sprinkler head was 4 cents. And I want to say I did about 700 heads a day, twice a day. I think that's what it was. And I might be way off on that number, but
yeah, man, that doesn't sound like much.
No, it wasn't a lot of money. That was what I was doing while I was going to school.
Oh, okay. So while you were going to electronics school, you were doing that?
Yes. But I also drove a swather for them.
That's like $28.
Yeah. And do that twice a day.
Okay.
So yeah, $56 a day, roughly.
Yeah.
But then I drove swather for them, and that was kind of fun. And that was nice because that was almost always night work. Get out there and drive the swather at night, cut the grass. And
is that what that does? It just cuts the grass? Just a giant lawnmower?
Cuts it and puts it in a windrow.
Oh, okay.
And a lot of people had a big problem. The grass would wrap up on the auger. And one of the things that my boss told me, he says, if that grass starts wrapping up on you, he says, you have to go faster. Well, that played right into my wheelhouse.
Yeah, right.
Because it's like going slow. I didn't want to slow down. I wanted to go faster.
Yeah.
And I got to
speed it up.
Yeah, I got to the point where I'd drive that swather down one end, and it had turning brakes on it, and I could hit both of those turning brakes, pop my header bar up a little bit, and that'd shift the weight on the machine, and I could spin it around without turning the steering wheel. That worked really well until I started dropping the steering wheels off the back. I'd break something, and I actually lost one wheel in the middle of the night, and we never ever found it.
Jesus.
And as far as I know, it's still laying in a ditch somewhere out here on the prairie.
Probably. There's a lot of stuff laying in ditches on the prairie.
Right. And and then I remember one time I was running a disc for them on a field, and was going right along Highway 95. I think my 3rd time around the field, around the perimeter, I saw a bunch of multicolored spaghetti sticking up out of the ground. I had managed to run over one of those big green phone boxes. And I suspect I shut off all of Rathdrum phones. I told my boss about that, and he's like, oh, don't tell anybody.
Yeah, right.
They'll figure it out.
Didn't have any like pylons or something around it, just to...
Nope. It was just out there off the side of the road in the edge of the field.
Wow.
And I just didn't notice it the first time through, or maybe I just got closer than I thought I was. But
had your headphones up a little too loud,
right? Yeah, something. And yeah, it was my third time around, I think, when I noticed those wires sticking up out of the ground. It's like, oh, that's probably not a good thing.
Oh well.
But yep,
it's AT&T's problem.
Right. So yeah, that was kind of fun. I mean, not that actually that instance, but
I don't know. I would have found that fun.
Well, it was kind of fun. It was funny. Yeah. And then we did. We used to burn the fields.
Yeah.
And that was an interesting proposition. To light the field on fire, you'd sit on a chair, school bus chair, that was mounted backwards in the back of a pickup. And you had a torch on the end of a stick, or on the end of a pipe. And they'd drive around the field, and you'd be riding around in the back of that truck with your torch, igniting the grass.
And that was just for like refertilization?
Yeah.
To burn it down and,
yep.
Like a phoenix?
Yep. That biochar is good for the ground.
Yeah.
And I don't know what they do now that they don't let them burn anymore.
Chemicals?
I think so.
All kinds of chemicals.
Yep. But it was kind of funny because you'd ride around going backwards in that truck for all afternoon. Every time you stopped, the ground would look like it was coming at you.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it was bizarre. And then every now and then I'd get on the fire truck when we were burning the fields. And that was, you'd ride around in the basket on the front of a truck with your hose. And there were times when we'd be out there and that smoke would be so thick you literally could not see 4 feet. And we'd have 5 or 6 or 7 trucks driving around in that field like that. And I don't know how somebody didn't get killed with a collision, because you'd have all these trucks driving in that smoke and nobody could see, and nobody had a collision. There were times where it was close enough that I heard a truck go by.
Yeah.
And that smoke could be so thick that you couldn't breathe either. And you'd be hoping that your driver was hurrying up and get through that smoke so that you could get a breath. Because you could breathe, but it wasn't doing you any good. Yeah. Because there was no oxygen in that air.
Right. I don't know, either just dumb luck or experienced drivers who just...
Well, and I think it was a little of both. Yeah. And they could see where each other was going into the smoke and which direction they were going. So, yeah. But there was a couple times where I know it got close because you'd hear them. and it wasn't a quiet operation. So when you heard another truck, you weren't more than about 10 feet away from them.
See, it's true. Loud pipes save lives.
Right. You
just put glass packs on all those farm trucks. Yep. Then you know exactly where everybody is.
Yep. Yeah. And I remember, and this is actually one of the first interactions I had with the fire department that I volunteered with, which was Post Falls. And I did that while I was working at Instrumentation Laboratories. So that was also in the mid 80s, mid to late 80s. But we were driving down, or I was driving a tractor back to the Idaho ranch, they called it, which I think that is, I want to say it's on Idaho Road.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, it's one of the east-west roads going across the prairie out here.
Yeah.
But I was driving along, and I saw a car went by me, and I think I was probably, pulling a disc or something down the highway, taking it to the shop, or take down the road. But, and a car passed me, and by the time I got up to where they were, or had, at one point, I could see fire starting on the edge of this field. And it was a grain field. It wasn't one of Jacqueline's fields. But I didn't have any means of doing anything. I went to the nearest house because this is pre-cell phone times.
Yeah.
So I went to the nearest house and I said, I need to use your phone. And I called the farm shop and I told them what was going on. And they called the fire department and sent our fire trucks out. Well, the Post Falls Fire Department got there first with their attack truck. By then, the fire was probably about an acre and a half into this wheat field. It was ready to harvest. And
some jackass probably threw a cigarette out of their car.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
And so when the attack truck from the fire department got there, they drove into the burned area and started hitting the fire with the hose. Well, turns out when you do it that way, all that does is blow the fire out into the unburned grass, unburned wheat. So they were actually making it worse.
Yeah.
Because they didn't want to drive into it's ingrained in everybody. You don't drive out into a wheat field that needs to be harvested.
Yeah, but I mean, losing a little bit of grain where a truck drove through versus all of it because you're blowing fire into it.
Right. And well, by the time they were starting to realize this is what was going on, the Jacqueline fire trucks got there with some guy out on the front basket, and they drove out into the grain ahead of the fire and blew it back into the burned area.
Yeah.
And put it out just in minutes. So I learned something at that point, that this is how you need to address a fire in a grass field or something. Is you don't come in to the burned area, you go into the unburned area and blow the fire back.
Yeah.
And then, it was probably about a year later. I was coming home from work one day when I was working over at Instrumentation Labs in Spokane and living in Coeur d'Alene at the time. And I was coming home from work and I saw a few plumes of smoke over near the dam in Post Falls. And I thought, well, I'm going to go over there and see what's going on. And I drove over there and I got there just about the time the fire department showed up. And I said, you guys need any help? He's like, yeah, jump on. So I got on the truck and I drove, went back in there with them and I worked on that fire with them for well into the night. I think it was about midnight when I finally went home. I said, I got to go. I got to get up in the morning and go to work.
Yeah.
And they weren't real happy that I was leaving then. And by then it was, I think, Bureau of Land Management had showed up, and they were the ones actually working the fire. But at one point we were walking along, and we're walking through a burned area, and it just pitch black out. And of course, because it's a burned area, everything is black. And we had flashlights, and we're shining the flashlight around on the ground, and you could just kind of see the little gray tips of ash on the burned pine needles and stuff that was on the ground. And we're walking along, and I realized just beside me, I couldn't see these gray ash tips. And I said, stop for a minute. There was about 3 or 4 guys walking along here, myself and 3 or 4 others. And I said, stop for a minute. And we stopped and we started looking. We were actually walking right along the top edge of one of those rock cliffs back there. And we didn't realize it. And we were within 6 feet of that edge, and everything was so black that somebody could have just walked off of that and not even known.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Everything's burned and black, and then it's pitch black out anyway. It's probably nothing for moonlight or anything.
Not a bit.
So you're standing right next to a cliff edge and can't see a damn thing.
They're not big cliffs, but I don't know, they're 25, 35 feet high.
I mean, still, if you step off of that and you don't know that you're stepping off of it.
No, you're hurting.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, fall from 20 feet, I think, could kill you.
I think so. But yeah. And, I can remember years later that I got into rock climbing and we would go out there and do a lot of top roping, which was kind of fun, kind of interesting.
So I can never get into that. I've thought about it. It looks cool, but I'm like, ugh, God, no.
Yep. The only problem I ever had with any of that was the edge. Once I'm on the face, no problem. But when I'm standing on that edge, I just feel like something's pulling me. And I went down to Moab several years ago and on a Land Rover rally, and there's one trail out there that's called Top of the World.
I've heard of that.
You drive out to the end of the trail, and I want to say it's about a 400-foot straight face. And there's one rock that sticks out probably about 15 feet. And it's big enough that people drive their vehicle out on it, and you can get out beside it an area and photograph that this vehicle is out on this rock with nothing under it. And it's just one of those things that everybody wants to do.
Yeah.
And I couldn't do it. And I couldn't even get close to that edge. And I went around on the side area where people were taking pictures from and saw how big that edge was and how long that drop was. It's like, nope, I can't even get close to that edge. But and that, I think, stemmed from a backpacking trip that I did down on the Salmon River with a friend of mine. And we were walking along, and it was a girl, and she just kept looking around, just oblivious to her feet. And we were walking a section of trail that had a bunch of cobble in it, just rocks sticking up. And it was very exposed to where if you actually set your foot off of the trail, you probably were going to go, and it wasn't a cliff per se, but it was a steep enough bank that if you went off the trail,
you were going to tumble.
Stopping. Yeah. And you were going to go 200 to 300 feet to the river. And she'd stumble on these rocks and everything, and I just kind of had a panic attack. And I said, I need to get in front of you. Well, then I could hear her scattering and stumbling. Well, that wasn't better. So we got to one point, and I says, no, I need to go back. She's like, well, I just want to go up here to, I think they called it the Lover's Leap, which is a spot on this trail where it's an overlook, and it's pretty much about a 400-foot sheer drop. I'm like, okay, I'll wait here for you. I'm not going any further. Because I don't know if I never experienced anything like that up to that point in my life, but it was just, I'm sure that was a panic attack. But since then, I cannot do edges. But yeah, when I was rock climbing, I didn't have a big problem. I could go right up to that edge and set my ropes and throw them over and all of that and go back down. But
yeah, I need to do more backpacking trips.
Yeah, I used to do a fair amount of it, and I enjoyed it.
I should say I need to do a backpacking trip.
Right.
I haven't never done one yet.
Okay.
I had planned to do one last year, but then weather came and kind of messed it up. But
it will. Yep. Yeah, I can remember thinking how the sleeping pads were just kind of for sissies, until I went out in the winter one time. And I laid down in my tent, which was on the snow, and there's no insulation under you, and that just sucked the heat right out of me.
Right.
And I ended up pulling all the clothes out of my pack and laying them under my under my body, and then putting my legs on top of my pack. And that was the only way I got any sleep that night.
Yeah.
Then I went down and bought a sleeping pad. But
I mean, I get it. Anything you can do, especially as a man, to challenge yourself and to do things, the hard way in some cases.
Yep.
I can't remember who it was recently that I heard was talking about it, but a bunch of guys in this men's group that I go to, they were talking about this challenge where it's 3 days. So it's 3 days. There's no cell phones, no books, no nothing. You don't get any tools. Like, you can take a canteen of water with you,
right?
And maybe like one of those filter straws or something, but that's it. You take all the clothes that you can pack on you and walk with, and you just walk out into the woods,
right?
And you just go out there for 3 days and just survive.
Yep. And
it sounds cool.
It does.
And I'm up for the challenge of giving it a try.
Right.
Even if I don't make it through.
Right.
But I mean, human bodies are also very fragile.
We are.
A lot more fragile than some people like to think we are.
Oh, yeah.
Especially in the wintertime. If you're just sleeping in a tent, if you can have something as stupid as a sleeping mat,
Yep.
I mean, why not?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, no, I used to think that I was up for, doing something like that to where you could just put me out into the woods and I'd be okay. I'd be cold the first night. After that, I'd be fine.
And that's what I've heard. The first night is the worst.
Right.
Because you're out there, you're miserable, and you're like, this sucks. I have a nice house to go home to, and, a wife, girlfriend, kids, whatever, if you're married and whatnot.
Yep.
Like, you have all this stuff that you think about. Because it's hard for us to tear ourselves away from the modern world and all of our conveniences and comforts.
Yep, and it's getting harder.
Yeah. But after that first night, if you can power through it and just say, like, nope, I'm good, I'm going to keep doing this, then usually the other 2 nights are not that bad.
Right. But you do have to do some research before you do it. You have to know what's out there, what you can eat, what you better not eat.
Right. You need to know what kind of berries are in the area that you can digest, stuff that you're not supposed to touch, plants.
Right.
Is it, rut season?
Right. Yep.
Is there bears out there right now?
Right.
Wolves.
Yep. And we're pretty fortunate in the inland Northwest here. We don't have much in the way of anything that'll get you.
Yeah.
I mean, we've got the occasional bear. They're usually not an issue.
Yeah.
Black bears in particular, they're generally, if you come across a black bear, they're going to leave. They're
generally more afraid of you than you are them.
Yeah. Moose, I'd be more afraid of a moose than a bear.
Right. Especially if there's a baby around.
Oh yeah. A couple years ago, myself and my nephew were riding our motorcycles up on a couple of the logging roads over in the Kellogg area. Came around a corner and there was a moose and a little calf that I'm sure wasn't more than a couple years old. It was like wobbly.
Yeah.
And we stopped.
All Bambi style.
Yeah. And this cow moose, and I guess they're cows, her and her calf, they started going away from us, which, okay, good. Well, the calf tumbled down off the side of the road. Not anything significant, it went down, I don't know, 15, 20 feet. And so I thought, okay, we're going to go by. So I take off, and we had comms in our helmets, my nephew and I. So I take off, and I was riding my R1200 GS Adventure.
Oh, yeah.
And
nice bike.
I enjoy it.
Do you still ride?
Not much. I didn't even get it out this year, which part of that was I've just been too busy with the house, trying to get a house built. But so I take off, and out of the corner of my eye, I see this moose coming back up the bank at me. And my nephew's like, she's coming up, you better go. So I kind of hit the throttle and I take off, and then I hear him on the radio, oh shit, and that's all I heard. Well, I'd gone around the corner.
Yeah.
And she didn't follow me, so I thought, oh man, did she turn around and go get him? Is she stomping on him? Is that why the radios quit?
Yeah.
And no, I went back around, and he had just turned around and went the other way and gotten out of the range of the little helmet radios.
Yeah. He just took off.
But so that was kind of comical. But yeah, it was, those moose they're not happy.
They're brutal, man. And yeah, they don't give up.
Yep. On the other hand, I had a little moose that was probably a year and a half old, living in my driveway for a week, couple winters ago.
Yeah. I had that too, living in Osborne.
Yep.
Back in.
Yep. I actually went and got a bale of hay and spread it out for her until my neighbor decided he was going to chase her off with a pellet gun. Oh. Which I really should have called the Fish and Game and said, hey, there's a guy out here harassing the moose with the pellet gun. But because that's a big no-no.
Yeah, this is probably 305 or 304, something like that.
Yeah.
I was working at Yokes in Kellogg, and I was doing nights throwing freight.
Okay.
And I came home in the morning, and there was a moose, big son of a bitch, just laying down in the front yard. I pull into the driveway, and she stands up, just staring at me, and I didn't even want to get out. I'm like,
yeah, what do I do now?
Yeah. And then she turns around and starts walking around the backside of the house. I'm like, all right, I get out. I go and I'm trying to find my camera, because I didn't have a camera phone at the time.
Sure.
I didn't have any of that stuff. So I was just trying to take pictures of her, and she's walking through the backyard. And then I stepped out the back door. And so this was in Osborne, I think on 3rd Street.
Okay.
So right up against the freeway off ramp.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, the fence was probably as tall as this divider that I have right here.
Right.
And this thing is all legs.
Oh, yeah.
Huge ass moose, all legs. And I was trying to just keep my distance, but still trying to get a decent picture of her. It was dark out, so I didn't really get shit. Mm-hmm. But like I'd move a little bit, and then she'd turn and walk a little ways away, and then I'd go a little closer, and she'd walk a ways away. And I think she finally just got tired of me.
Right.
So she goes over to that fence and just steps over it like it's nothing.
Right.
And then goes up underneath the freeway and disappeared. And I was just like, when she walked over that fence is when I realized really like how big that thing was.
Yep.
Because just perspective of it, maybe it was because she was so far away.
Sure.
It just didn't seem like she was that big. But then I realized when she stepped over that fence, like nothing was there.
Yep.
I was like, oh, okay, this thing's huge. I should probably not try to follow her.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Yeah, she came back the next night and was laying in the front yard again. And as soon as I pulled in, she just walked away. And this time I was like, I'm not screwing with you. You do whatever.
Uh-huh.
She did that for like a week. I'd come home and she'd be laying in the front yard, and then she would just get up and leave when I came back.
Uh-huh. Interesting. Well, I was trying to think of the very first job I ever had.
Oh, yeah.
That I actually got paid for. And I think I got paid probably 25 cents an hour.
Wow.
I was in grade school. My grandmother was a 4th grade school teacher. So because of that, we knew all of the teachers.
Yeah.
And the substitute teachers. And one of the substitute teachers owned a bookstore in Pinehurst at the time. And for whatever reason, he offered to let me come over and work in the bookstore. And so I'd go work in the bookstore and do, just straightening up the back and sweeping the sidewalk out in front of the store, that kind of stuff. Mm-hmm. Nothing real exciting, but yeah, I would say I was probably 6th grade, maybe 5th grade. Trying to remember which class he was substitute teacher for me.
Yeah, but I mean, for one, it was a different time back then.
Oh, definitely.
And I think people understood more, the value of on honest days hard work.
Yep. No
matter what age you are.
Well, and it was okay to let your kid go out and be gone for hours.
Right. See, I don't know. I don't think that there's any more weirdness and predators and whatever else out there than there ever have been before.
Probably
I think it's just you see it more because we have the internet.
Yep, I think that's true.
But I also think that there's so much more distrust because of it, and not that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I mean, yeah, even I remember you could get on your bike and you just tell, okay, I'll be back.
Oh, yeah.
And your parents told you, be back at this time because that's when dinner is.
Yep.
Or be back as soon as the street lights turn on.
Yep.
And that was it. You disappeared.
Right.
They didn't know where you were, and you didn't tell them.
Yep.
And if they really wanted to know, they would call your friends' houses and like, hey, do you know where Billy is? No.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, I can, and that was when I was a kid, and hey, can I go over to Wayne's house? Yep. Be back in a half an hour.
Yeah.
We got so much stuff done in a half an hour.
Right.
Anymore, I can't put my shoes on in a half an hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
you had a time limit and you knew you better use it well.
Yep.
I mean, you could play several rounds of Mortal Kombat on Sega.
Right. But yeah. But no, I can remember when I was 8. Well, let's see. I would have been 9. My cousins were 8 and 10. And the 3 of us would go out camping for the weekend with guns. Oh,
yeah. Yeah.
So, 8, 9, and 10, we had a 22, a 30-30, and a 12 gauge that we would take out with us for the weekend. We'd be out there building fires, building a cabin, cooking our own food.
Yeah, learning how to actually do important stuff.
Right.
And how to take care of yourselves.
Yep.
I think it's just a different dynamic,
It is.
people place so much emphasis on, for one, kids just need to be kids, and
Right.
they let kids be children far too long.
Yep.
And they don't force them to learn stuff at an early age. They should learn, just because you take your kids fishing and you're teaching them how to start fires and how to do all this other stuff that they should know how to do.
Right.
That doesn't mean you're taking away their childhood.
Right.
Sitting around playing video games and dicking around on your phone, that's not having a childhood.
Right. No.
Those early years are for learning how to be an adult.
Absolutely. And I think an awful lot of people, well, for one, they don't interact with their kids.
Yeah, not much anymore.
They just want to push them aside and not hear them, not see them.
Yeah.
But make sure they do what they tell them to do.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
And I think you're right. I think children need to be able to go out and play. Like I say, when I got a motorcycle, and my cousins got motorcycles, and I guess that would have been about junior high-ish, we'd be gone on our motorcycles for the weekend.
Yeah.
Well, we might be 40 miles back into the woods.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we used to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a, what was it? Was it like a 70 or something, or an 80 something Honda Trail 90?
Oh yeah, fantastic little machine. But
not much for power. They were pretty gutless, but somehow they would still get up just about anywhere.
Yep.
And I had friends that had 4-wheelers and dirt bikes, and that's what we'd do. We'd just take off.
Oh, absolutely.
For a night or something and go up to Lake Elsie and just sleep in the sticks, or somebody would bring a little tent or something.
Yeah. Have you been up there recently?
Actually, I think I went up to Elsie last year.
Okay.
And it's a lot different up there.
Oh man, yeah.
They've turned it into like full campground.
Yeah, you could take a big camp trailer up there now.
Yeah, they've definitely done a lot of work on the road. It's still crappy, but it's not nearly as bad as it used to be.
Yep. No, I was going up there a couple of years ago and come around the corner, and there's some kid flying down the road on his motorcycle doing the high bank.
Yeah.
He would come down off of one of those banks and hit the skids, and he dropped his bike and ran about 4 more steps into the front of the truck. By then, of course, I was stopped. But
yeah, Glidden Lake is about the same too.
Mm-hmm. I don't think I've ever been to Glidden.
Really?
Yeah.
Yeah, I went up there. I went up there last year. Yeah, I went up there last year because there's Lower Glidden Lake, and then there's Upper Glidden Lake. Mm-hmm. And Lower Glidden, the road goes all the way up to it, and they have camp spots and stuff around it. There's no services or anything, but you can get a camper up there.
Sure.
And then Upper Glidden, you can only get there by hiking a trail that's like a mile down the road from Lower Glidden.
Okay.
So it's about a mile or 2 before you get to Lower Glidden on the road. And there's like, you'll come around this corner, and then there's a turnout kind of where you can park. Mm-hmm. And then about, 50 yards up from that, there's a trail that goes up into the mountain.
Right.
And so if you just hike that, and it's not super steep, but it's decent. Mm-hmm. And it's uphill about 90% of the way up there.
Right.
Yeah. And then it levels off, and you got like another 10, 20 yards, and bam, you're right there, open. Upper Glidden it's beautiful up there. Mm-hmm. I did that last year because that's where I wanted to do my hiking packing trip that got rained out.
Oh, uh-huh.
And so I went and I took my pack with all of my gear, like everything, almost everything. And I was like, all right, let's give this a shot. Let's test out, see how it does before the actual day comes to do it. And I counted, I stopped like 10 times on the way up, and had to just stop and breathe. And I was like, I am so much more out of shape than I thought I was.
Yep. Yeah. Years ago, I took a trip over in the Anaconda Pintler Wilderness up to Johnson Lake. And Johnson Lake is at, I want to say 9,000 feet.
Yeah, it's a ways up there.
Then we were going to go over a little pass on the trail, which is, I think, about another 800 feet higher than Johnson Lake. And I couldn't do it. We got to the point where you'd take about 10 steps and you'd be breathing hard and just panting, and you couldn't keep going. You'd stop and stand there for a minute, and you'd be completely recovered. Take another 10 steps, and you couldn't breathe.
Yeah.
And it's like, okay, this just isn't working. We just turned around and went back down to Johnson Lake and stayed another night.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's not only that it's, uphill and all that, but when you're up that high, the oxygen level's different.
Yep.
So much thinner.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, it's rough. Sounds fun though.
Yeah. It was a nice time. And I can remember sitting there eating breakfast, having trail mix and pancakes. I actually took pancake mix and a little bottle of syrup with me.
Nice.
And the chipmunks up there, no people, but the people that go up there don't mess with them. They won't pick on them or anything else. Mm-hmm. Well, I'd be sitting there on the ground, sitting on a root with my legs crossed in front of me, eating my pancakes, and here comes this chipmunk onto my lap and willing to take a piece of pancake out of my fingers. and I after I got done, I set my plate down on the ground between my knees, and this little chipmunk could jump over my leg into that plate I just used in a pie tin, and he'd jump into there, and he just was going to town on the syrup that was in that plate. But and every now and then I'd flip like an M&M out of the trail mix.
Yeah.
They'll pick that up and they'll peel the candy coating off.
Really?
Like it's a nutshell, and then eat the chocolate.
That's weird.
Yeah.
I wonder if they don't realize that it's a candy coating, or if they think it's actually like a shell, like an acorn.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like it's an instinct thing.
Yeah, that's what it looked like. Was they were peeling the shell off of it before they could eat it. But yeah, it was fun because
it's weird.
You don't get to interact that personally with wild animals very often.
Yeah, not usually.
So, yeah.
I mean, it's weird because the only time it seems like you do is when you go into an area where people don't normally ever go.
Right.
So the animals aren't used to people, right? So they just think that you're some other animal, and they don't think that you're dangerous or something. They don't know any better.
Yeah.
Or if it's an area where people go all the time, and they've realized that you're not there to hurt them or anything.
Right. Yep.
And so they've gotten used to people, and they're just like, yeah, whatever.
Right. Yeah, and
it's almost like there's a middle ground there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you can go down to the beach down here, and obviously the ducks and the geese and the seagulls are all used to people.
Yep.
But the people mess with them.
Yeah.
The kids will chase them, and the people will throw sticks at them or whatever. Right. So they don't necessarily have positive interaction.
Right.
But yeah, up and you get out in the wilderness like that, and the people that do interact with them have positive interactions with them, so they don't
usually. Yeah.
Yeah, they don't see them as a threat.
Yeah.
So yeah.